All right, it's another day here at Adrian Health Performance Park, going in to see Tommy Wilson, Technical Director for Charlotte FC, who just came here from Philadelphia Union, which is an exceptional academy, exceptional development program, and has kind of been known throughout MLS as one of the best. So looking forward to talking to Tommy, seeing why he came and what we can learn from him about what he does. It's time for the Charlotte FC podcast.
Block, Duesback's gonna get it back. Westwood, rather Vargas, the touch, the finish! Gone! The Alba, whipped in, good ball! Oh! Christian Kalina, a save to save the season!
Crown belongs to Charlotte! And Charlotte FC, if the results hold, have clinched its first playoff berth in club history!
Nick Finelli here with Tommy Wilson, the Technical Director of Charlotte FC. Tommy, we always have our guests do a quick elevator pitch. So if I'm in an elevator with you, you don't know me, I don't know you, how would you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm sort of born and raised in Glasgow. When I left school, I went into engineering, mechanical and production engineering, which I think I didn't realise at the time, but it kind of stood me in good stead for my career after being a player. For 14, 15 years, I played in the Premier League in Scotland. And towards the end of my playing career, I get really interested in coaching. I've told this story before, but I was in a car every day when I was at Dunfermline going to training and games with David Moyes, who's the manager or was a manager at West Ham, Ian McCall, who was a manager in the Premier League in Scotland, and Billy Davis, who also coached in the Premier League in England. So we were really, I think we were all desperate to be in coaching. So when I stopped playing, I became the football development officer for the City of Glasgow, working for the Scottish FA. And then I sort of worked my way through the pathway there until I became a national team coach. But also at the same time, I was a director of coaches education for Scotland and worked with UEFA. So that sort of rekindled my interest in coach education. So coaching on one hand and coach education on the other. Mm-hmm. So, but I was missing the game when I was working for the Scottish FA, even though I was coaching. I wasn't coaching every day. So I left to go to Rangers, and I was the Academy Technical Director there.
You were a Rangers fan, right? You grew up a Rangers fan?
Well, I would say my family are Rangers fans. I was always playing every weekend. Mm-hmm. So, I would say I would lean more towards Rangers than any other team. And after having worked there, you get bitten by the bug. Mm-hmm. You get sort of Rangers-itis. It's like when you're working any big club, right? You get institutionalised a little bit. So I worked at Rangers for 7 years. Loved the experience. It's a unique environment to be in a club that's over 150 years old now. And somebody told me that it's one of the winningest clubs in world soccer.
Wow.
Rangers, the amount of trophies and leagues and cups they've won. I mean, to be fair, in Scotland, it's Rangers and Celtic every other year.
Were you at all a Celtic fan? Because you live close to Celtic Park, right?
Yeah, I grew up close to Celtic Park. And my grandfather on my mother's side and my mother's side of the family were more aligned to Celtic. Mm-hmm. But no, I wouldn't say that I was.
And there was no house divided thing like they have here about that.
Not really. Okay. No, I mean, myself and my two brothers both became professionals at different levels, which is unusual. So I had to kind of battle to be the best player in my family before I could be anything else. My dad was a professional as well. Tommy, he's the same name as me. So I guess it was natural that we would gravitate towards professional sport. Mm-hmm. And I remember when my first senior club was Queen's Park, who play in the National Stadium in Scotland. And I told my dad, I said, Dad, I came home from work one day. I said, I've got a trial for Queen's Park. And I remember him saying, I'm not sure you're at that level yet, son, you know. So he kept my feet in the ground.
I also read you had a cousin that kind of went the football route, but then didn't make it.
Yeah,
that kind of made you think secondly about, like, do I need to do this as a career or what should I do? Yeah,
that was Ian, who still lives in England, Ian Wilson. He went to Birmingham and got released and ended up playing what was called non-league there in Tamworth. But I mean, he's still involved in the game. He was at Rangers and scouts for Southampton. So I think my family's interest in the game and knowledge of the game kept my feet in the ground. Mm-hmm. So that's why I studied to be an engineer. And when I concluded my 4 years in engineering at Caterpillar, an American company, I really learned a lot about processes and developing things. But my love and my heart was always in the game, and so I decided to go and sign for St Mirren, and that was a top professional club in Scotland at that point.
Yeah.
And pursued that career.
And you played over 400 games as a professional. I read that you were a defender, right?
Yes.
Right back, centre back, kind of mixed?
No, right back or left back. I wasn't tall enough to be a centre back. I remember being involved in a lot of assists for goals, but they didn't count them then. But I only scored one goal throughout my career, which is fairly pathetic when I think about it now. But yeah, I was always an attacking defender.
Now, I read that you talked about your dad and you growing up just as a footballer, and just like his style of, maybe it's even parenting or kind of leading, is that he kind of just lets you do things. He didn't like say stuff about you after the game. He didn't, really like pick on you, like you need to do this better, that kind of stuff. So what did you take from growing up with a parent who did that into this kind of world?
I think I'm really, really grateful for it, because I'm always saying to the players, even like now when I'm exposed to the first team here and the young first team players, it's your journey. It's not anyone else's. So my dad was at all my games. I can remember him being at all of the games. Even when I was a pro, he would come to the games. And occasionally I would seek his advice, but I can't remember ever being disappointed in my performance or lecturing me on how I should have done this or done that, the next thing.
He was just there for you.
He was just there. And if I could give any parents out there that are listening some advice, it would be to follow that path, because it's hard enough in a game. You've got, like, you think about it, you've got an opponent, you've got a referee, sometimes you've got a crowd of people watching.
Right.
You've got the ball that doesn't always bounce in straight lines. So
you have your teammates.
You've got all that. You've got all these split-second decisions to make, and you've got your parents' voice shouting across the field that you could pick out amongst. Doesn't matter how many thousand people are there. Right. You can pick out your parents' voice. So, and a lot of the parents have never even played the game.
Oh yeah.
Like at least my dad had played a little bit. So it's hard. I found myself in those shoes more recently, and it's hard not to say anything, but I would say it's the best thing.
Yeah. So do you feel growing up in that soccer family, you were just destined to do something in soccer, in football, and just not just, like you said, you had the backup as the engineer, but were you kind of just like, I'm going to end up doing something with football the rest of my life?
No, really, no. I was realistic. I knew I was a good player. I was always considered one of the best players in my town where I grew up and in my school. But I never played for one of the top, it was boys' clubs they were called in Britain. I didn't play for one of the top boys' clubs until I was 16, 17. So it came late for me. And then even when I was at my first club at Queen's Park, players were being selected to go into the first team and I wasn't selected. I think there was a physical aspect to that because I wasn't as fully developed as my teammates were. I was a late developer. So, but I just kept fighting away and battling away, and I actually loved being an engineer. I really enjoyed it. And when I think about it now, like I consider a football club or a soccer club to be like a manufacturing plant. You know, you bring raw material in at one end, you put it through some processes and it comes out the other end, and hopefully it comes out and goes into the first team. So there's a lot of parallels for me, in player development and engineering.
Right, and there's lots of things that have to happen inside of that to make it all really come out. That's polished product.
Yeah.
So that's where you focus in on those details.
Yeah, that's where you need to get it right. You need to get all the processes right. And I think that's my job here, to assist with that. I think like people have asked me, like the technical director role is a bit nebulous. It's a little bit unclear. A lot of people do it differently. So I think like when I was younger, I still like sports cars, and I used to have an old sports car with a wooden steering wheel.
Oh, do you remember the kind of was?
I had a Triumph Spitfire, and my father-in-law at the time had a MGB. So, and I think like the technical director sits in the middle where the horn is, and the spokes go out to the different departments.
Right.
And it's my job to interact with the different departments, like the coaches, the scouting, the medical, the performance, recruitment, and to try and help them get better. And if I can help each of the departments get 1 or 2% better, then the product that we're producing here, or manufacturing, will be better. Yeah. Because, you know, I've not been surprised, but I've been pleasantly surprised that there's a lot of good young players in this building, and I feel like we've got the staff in place that can help to improve them.
That's fantastic. Now, when you were, you know, like you said, you were in the car, kind of thinking about you all wanted to get into coaching. Was there like besides that moment, did you feel like that was the obvious path at that time, since you had already had this kind of long career, and that you just really wanted to be a part of, you know, making things happen on the coaching level?
Yeah, well, I think when you're a professional soccer player, you go from being, I'm exaggerating to make a point here, idolised.
Right.
You go from, you're in the newspapers and on the TV a lot. And the only thing you really know is how to run about and kick the ball. There wasn't a lot of different career paths that you could take then when you stopped playing. So you can start to feel your career coming to an end. And I was thinking to go back into engineering. And engineering had moved so fast. Like when I finished doing my 4 years, numerical, I can remember it, NC machines were coming into play then. So, and I was helping program them, and it was a binary tape you were using to program the computers.
Right.
You know, it was like paper
little tape,
with holes in it.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that now.
It's all digital. None of that is even part of it. Yeah.
So, and there was rooms in the building for these big, massive computers that were being air cooled. I mean, nowadays it moves on so fast. So I thought engineering's out.
You have to go back to school again.
Yeah. And then some of the guys I was playing with, a lot of former players would go and buy a pub because there's a lot of football fans would go. So
Right.
So I thought about that, and I thought, no, that's not for me. It's not for me.
You still want to be active.
Yeah, you're wrestling with what your next step is. And for the last 2 or 3 years when I was playing, I was also coaching and getting involved in coaching on the side. I came over to America quite often to go to camps here.
Coaching camps?
Coaching camps,
Okay.
yeah. And Bobby Clark, who was the head coach the Scottish guy, was the head coach at Notre Dame and Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
I get involved with him in coaching at the camps, and it really put a fire under me. I felt I wasn't great, but I thought I could get good at it.
Mm-hmm.
I seem to be able to relate to the players, so that reinforced my belief that I wanted to go into coaching, and I was doing a bit of coaching on the side for the Scottish FA, and
Wait, you don't just go into the Scottish FA. How do you just get into doing some coaching on the side?
Well,
unless you're like really young kids or something like that.
Yeah. Well, what happened was let me think now. I went to the coaching courses.
Okay.
At Largs to do my licenses, coaching license,
Mm-hmm.
and then after I had got the coaching license, the staff invited me back as, we called them runners.
Mm-hmm.
It was like other candidates were doing their coaching license and I had completed mine, but I was just keeping myself fit and ticking over.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the senior guys at the SFA at that point realised I had an aptitude for it. So because I was reasonably well known,
Mm-hmm.
they were looking for former players to go out and coach in the community.
Right.
So that's how I get involved in that.
So would you say that was like your big break? Because once that was in, it kind of just
Yeah,
grew?
and then fortuitously an opportunity came up in Glasgow, and I was still living in Glasgow,
Mm-hmm.
to be a football development officer, they called it, which is, I don't know how to describe it here. It's like a regional coach. Maybe that would be more.
So
what it would
players came in from lots of different places, and you
or we in the city of Glasgow. Although I was working for the Scottish FA, but I was seconded to Glasgow City Council,
Mm-hmm.
and they had the biggest sports development unit in Britain. So I landed in a job there, and I was in an office with the rugby development officer, gymnastics, tennis,
It was a whole
swimming,
sporting kind of
Yeah.
promotion.
and all of my colleagues from rugby and swimming and gymnastics and tennis and people with disabilities and it was what other ones? You name it. Like
They had something.
they had a lot of former Commonwealth Games athletes, and
Mm-hmm.
so the difference between them and me was that I'd been a professional soccer player. Many of the sports they were in were amateur.
Mm-hmm.
So they had all gone to university and trained to be physical education teachers.
Right,
So
right.
they all had
That kind of training.
university degrees, and I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt a little bit inferior initially, thinking, I've been kicking a ball around. That's all I've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I tell you what, I learned a lot from them. Like they were all writing the rugby development plan and the gymnastics development plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I wouldn't know where to start. So I was able to get a look at what they were doing
Right.
and like replicate it.
Yeah.
But for football, the bit that I knew about.
Right.
So it was a really good learning experience for me. We went out into some of the communities in Glasgow are not the best. So we did a Football Against Drugs project, and we did a lot of diversionary work to take people away from crime, and
Yeah.
It
was in a way a community outreach to try to better people and bring them something that they look forward to.
Yeah, and we worked at all levels. We worked with young players in the schools. We worked with, at that point there wasn't, the girls' game and women's game wasn't as developed in Scotland as it is in the US, or it was. So we were able to access that market. And we also had a high performance component to it, where we created a City of Glasgow team. So it was a really interesting project, and I learned a hell of a lot through it.
Yeah.
And part of my job was also to do coach education in Glasgow. So I went out to the different communities, different clients, and put on coaching courses.
Sounds like that prepared you just in that kind of city level, because the Rangers were doing their own thing on the side, right?
Yeah.
And Celtic has their own kind of program. So those were going just for those kind of high level people.
Yeah.
But you were dealing with everybody kind of who wasn't in those tracks.
It was essentially recreational football, because, the Football Federation, their motto is it's like football for all.
Yeah.
So whether you're a male or a female, you're young or you're old, or it's for people with disabilities, you have to try and... One of the projects I get involved with was football for over 50s. And the last I heard, now that was 20 years ago, maybe more than that. When I was back in Glasgow recently, I spoke to someone, and they said that was still going on.
Oh, wow.
And I used to go out on a Friday night, and, I'd set it up. There was a couple of famous actors were involved in it. A guy called Tony Roper, who's really well known in Scotland. And a lot of their friends came along.
Yeah.
And even though I was playing, I think I was still playing then. I might have been playing for Kilmarnock or Dumbarton. It was towards the end of my career. I was still there on a Friday night. I wasn't running about because of the game the next day, but I'd set it up. It could almost run itself. But we did that. We did Football Against Drugs. When I went back into the Scottish FA from that role, I took on the head of youth development role.
Yeah.
And one of my most significant achievements was to appoint a development officer for people with disabilities. And I was really proud of the fact that we were able to reach into all these different communities and touch them with the game.
Yeah.
We took football, me and my colleagues, other football development officers, we took football right around the edge of Scotland and into the islands, into the rural communities where they weren't best served.
Yeah.
And what a beautiful country Scotland is. I didn't know, because I lived in Glasgow and never really left it.
Right.
But through that, I was able to go out, it was almost like doing the whiskey trail,
Yeah.
I was away out around all the Oban and Islay and Jura. And nowadays, when I'm looking, I don't drink whiskey, but you see it in the duty free in the airport.
Yeah.
And there's an Oban whiskey, there's a Jura, there's an Islay, and I'm thinking, that's all the places I visited.
Right, you know exactly where they
I
are.
know exactly where they are.
That's great. Now, did you, when you were with the Scottish Federation, did you cross paths with Scotty Arfield? Because he was kind of in that youth area at that time.
I was, at the end of my time with the Scottish FA, I was the under-19 national team coach. And then I took the under-20s to the World Cup. And we had really great success, particularly for a country the size of Scotland. We got to the final. We lost to Spain in the final 2-1 with Mata and Piqué and all these guys, World Cup winners in our team.
That's amazing.
And Scotty Arfield, because I remember, I said to Scott when I met him here again, I said, did I have you or invite you to a camp? And he said, no, he was the year, 1 year below that. But I remember his name coming across my desk.
Yeah.
Because he was at Falkirk at the time. And Falkirk we're not a Premier League club. I'm sure he was at Falkirk. I know he grew up in Livingston, but I think he played for Falkirk, and he was on the next group before that, and that's when I left to go to Rangers.
Oh, okay. So they did actually. So you worked for Rangers, I guess, for 5-6 years?
7 years.
7 years. Wow. And that went great. You got a good reputation of being, like you said, the technical director there. So you took your skills from other things. Then you go across the pond. You go to Philadelphia when they first start. Well, what made you leave?
A couple of things. Rangers were going through some financial troubles around that time, 11, 12, 13. And the ownership was changing a lot. And towards the end, Ali McCoist, Kenny McDowell, Ian Durrant were taking the first team, and they were like colleagues of mine. I played against them. I played with Ken McDowell, and I could see the toll that it was taking on, particularly Ali McCoist, who was manager at the time, like trying to keep the club afloat while players and staff were having to leave because of the financial constraints.
Yeah.
And the alarm bells were ringing a little bit. And I didn't have to leave. I had a really good job and I didn't have to leave. But I mentioned earlier about coming over to the States. Well, one of Bobby Clark's players was one of the owners of Philadelphia Union, and I had met him, Richie Graham, and I knew that they were looking for an academy director. And I thought the time was right to take on a fresh challenge. And I remember Richie saying to me at the time, you could stay at Rangers and make 1 or 2% of a difference. You could come here and make a massive difference.
Right.
And the project was really appealing. So I thought, I'll take the plunge and give it a go.
Now, did you have family and other things you had to consider for this, or was it still...
Yeah, no, I did. Yeah. It was a big decision for my family because, like immigrating, until you've done it, you don't realise just how overwhelming it can be. It's funny, moving from Philly to here reminded me of immigrating again,
Oh, gosh.
Moving, like you move from state to state. I've only done it once in the US. And
Yes.
It's like you need to get another driving licence. All the rules and regulations are different.
Yeah.
The people are different. It is like immigrating.
Yeah.
But no, my wife and I came over. I had a 3-year contract, and I thought we'll give it a go for 3 or 4 years and see what happens.
And it turned into
10
10 years,
10 years.
and Philadelphia being known as one of the best academies and best basically for getting homegrown players. I think it says here, I read that the first team had signed 35 or more homegrown players under your time at the academy. And you have players such as Brendan Aronson, Mark McKenzie. And then I think when you were getting closer to leaving there, just in the past couple of years, they moved the whole practice and all the stuff under one roof, kind of like they are here.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you went over there, was the focus to Philadelphia to promote homegrown talent and basically just to get kind of that, because it was a new club. It was to get that kind of, here's how you be successful in the States with this kind of program. Is that kind of what your role was?
Yeah, well, I remember Richie saying at the time when the role was being announced, and I think somebody might have asked him, and he said, we want to develop world-class players. And I was thinking, no pressure, world-class players, because when you think of the top, how do you define a world-class player?
Right.
And then has there ever been an American in that conversation?
Yeah. Right, from the development stage.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I mean, like, has the US had anyone that's considered world-class?
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't. there might be maybe one of the goalies.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Like of the current players, Christian Pulisic's probably played at the highest level. But if you're to be in the Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, Zinedine Zidane
Right.
realm, I would say probably not. So, but I did think there was great potential here. The amount of athletes in this country. I always believe, and I've said this often, if you look at the countries that excel, the effect that immigration has had on them is really significant. So when I was growing up watching the World Cup, because there wasn't a lot of live games on the TV, the French team and the Belgium team, who are in the top 2 or 3 in the world, if you looked at the teams then, they all look like me.
Yeah.
If you think about them now, even if you think of Germany,
Yeah.
the amount of immigration, the immigrants that play in their team. So when you think of the USA, it's such a melting pot of different cultures, different athletic types.
Yeah.
So, and USA's soccer's the biggest sport in the world, and USA's got the biggest sports economy in the world.
Right.
And that was Jay Sugarman, the union owner, that
Yeah.
I attribute that quote to, because I wrote it down after he said it. So I don't think the USA can fail, and it's only a matter of time.
Yeah. It's hard to. I think the hardest part about soccer in the States is the best athletes don't necessarily play soccer.
Yeah.
That competition, and like our best athletes are playing and doing other sports. Now it's starting to change a little bit. We are getting better athletes.
Yeah.
The ones that are like, this is my thing, and it happens to be soccer.
Yeah.
They happen to be good athletes.
Yeah, I met one of the Hornets players at a game. He was in Zoran's box. And I was looking at him, and he loves soccer.
Yeah.
He's a basketball player. And he was 6'6". And I'm thinking, if we had got our hands on him earlier,
Right.
what a goalie or a centre-back he could be, So I think that you're right that I don't ever see a time where basketball and football doesn't get first dibs on those type of athletes.
Right. Yeah.
But you never know.
Right.
And I know for a fact you can watch more soccer in this country than you can anywhere else in the world, because there's no blackouts.
Yeah.
So the game, I think the game will just keep growing here. There are a number of things that need to be done to help to improve it. But from when I came to where it is now, so when I came at the union to where the union is now, is like I couldn't believe it.
Right. That's a fine oiled machine, isn't it?
Well, unless you look under the hood, and you would see that. I always likened it to, like, it was like an ocean liner.
Yeah. It's hard to turn around.
Yeah, and if it gets off path, every day, all I would do would keep that on its path.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of managing, but I think once you get it on the path,
Yeah.
then it almost runs itself,
Yeah. You had one of our former players at Philadelphia as one of your homegrowns, Derek Jones. Do you have
Yes,
any, do you
I
have
remember
any,
that.
Do you have any stories about them? I know you found them. You were, I think, one of your teams was playing against
Lone
a
Star.
team. Yeah, and Lone Star, that's right. And you're like, he was the best player out there. But
Yeah.
once you got him into the system, can you tell me some things about Derek that you liked and you saw?
Yeah, that was it was just a chance encounter, really. We had some young players that needed a game. Lone Star were like a men's team, a mixed age group team, and we had some players from our under 18s and under 16s playing against them. And they were, I actually really liked that organisation, and every game against them was an adventure, because you never knew what was going to happen. The coaches were just different.
Right. Right.
And at the end, I just said I like your midfield player. And he says, I said, what age is he? He said 16, I think it was. So we brought Derek in, and he was so far ahead of a lot of the players that we had at that point, because we were just starting out.
Mm-hmm.
That the challenge with Derek was that I think he was living in the city, and we found it hard to get him to the training. We eventually we encouraged his parents to allow him to come and stay in our residency house.
Right.
So even though he was in the city,
Right.
we took it. We could control what he was eating. We could control when he was sleeping, where he was sleeping.
Right.
I mean, there was times after training that he would be hanging around the building, and I remember a couple of times saying, "Where are you going?" And I ended up taking him. You know, sometimes we would feed him. You know, it was, and he's not the only one in that boat. There's a number of players like that, but he was worth it.
Yeah.
And then it came to the bit where we were negotiating a contract with him. And I think it was his grandfather who was like the patriarch of the family, you know.
Yeah.
You know, there's a different culture in these families, and his grandfather was like the Lord Mayor, you know.
Yeah.
So he would come into my office, and I've told Jonesy knows this. So I always had the like nice pens and things, you know.
Yeah.
So I remember having a meeting, and I went back in, and where's my pen? So the next time we come in for the next meeting, we'll try to get him to sign, and he's got my pen. The grandfather, he's got my pen in the top pocket, and I could see him looking around the office. And I said to Jonesy, and he said, "Yeah, it's in the culture, you know. Like there has to be a gift for him or something."
Right.
And once I realised that, I was able to look after him, you know.
Right.
But and Derek and I haven't spoken to him for a while, but you know, there was one or two hairy moments where there was I remember there was his house got broken into late at night, and you know, it wasn't a great environment, but he made it through.
Yeah. Yeah, he used that opportunity.
He made it through.
Look where he is today.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a good thing for him. You talked about the challenges of, you know, like you were even in Scotland, and it's like you had an age group, and then you had another age group coming up. Is that one of the biggest challenges at all of any of this, is that you have these young players and they're with these age groups, so then they might be really good at this age, and then they go up to that next level. And you, not only for the coaches, they have a new team, but they have new players, and they're always adjusting. Is that the biggest challenge in making sure that those kids are still developing how they need to, even though now they might have to play a different position in a different team or do a different role, or their coach might be different?
There's so many challenges in player development that's just one of them.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to look down the road as a coach. I mean, at the Union, and Brendan Aronson really struggled when he was going through his growth spurt. He didn't play a lot. And the coaches and the players should be trying to win the next game.
Right.
That's why they train all week, you know.
Right.
They shouldn't be training all week to say another good defeat this week. They should be trying to win the next game. But alongside that, someone like me or someone in a similar role to mine has to look down the road and say, okay, Brendan is not playing that much just now because physically he's so inferior, but he's one of our top prospects. We need to challenge him. So there has to be a balance struck there. So you don't put out, let's say you've got a squad of 20 players, you don't put out all your late developers in the one team.
Right.
I always think about it like scaffolders. and the top players are at the top of the scaffolding, and the other ones are underneath,
Right.
supporting them.
Right.
But like Austin Trusty at Philadelphia Union, who just played the whole season in the English Premier League, he was one of the scaffolders, and a lot of the coaches were not delighted to have him in the group.
Yeah.
But when you look at the tools he had, he was quick, he was agile, he could jump and head the ceiling in this room. So he had a left foot.
Yeah.
So he had many attributes that are required to be a top player. So you just have to be patient and look down the road and try and predict the future a little bit. You don't have a crystal ball, but you need. That's the quality that you have to have. So the coaches and the players should want to win the next game. For me, it's about. So at the Union, we won the GA Cup a few times. We won the MLS Next Cup. We won a number of tournaments.
Right.
The biggest effect on the Union's profile was selling players, getting players in the first team and selling them on to Europe.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. There's only really one team in your club that you should be worried about winning, and that's the first team.
Yeah.
And everything else is insignificant.
Getting players better,
Yeah.
moving them in their capacity to play the best they can.
Yeah, and you need to, like, we, at the Union before I left, we spent a lot of time on PHV and growth and maturation. And, you know, we come up against a lot of teams that were filled with early developers that could win games because
they were just
strong and
stronger.
robust.
Yeah.
But down the road, there's a point around the 17, 18 age group where age doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like 16, 17. You can play in the first team at 16.
Right.
Age doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
So all the coping mechanisms and I know this for myself as a player, all the coping mechanisms that you have to combat the big guys and the strong guys,
Right.
you still have them.
Right.
The big strong guys don't, because they never had to develop them.
Right.
So you have to just take your time. Don't make rash decisions. Decide slowly.
Yeah.
And have a vision. And it really helps if you've gone through the cycle a couple of times.
Yeah.
First
year is hard.
That only comes with time. You know, you need to. I remember my first day at Rangers. I walked into the training ground and the under-14s were training, and I saw this tall, elegant, left-footed centre back, and his name was Danny Wilson. No relation to me. Danny went on to play. Was sold him to Liverpool for $5 million. He played for Rangers, for Scotland. He was at Colorado Rapids for a while over here, and he's back in Scotland playing for Queen's Park now. But when I saw him at age 14, I thought, he's got a chance.
Yeah.
But I didn't know because I hadn't been through the cycle before.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like now that I've been through the cycle and I've made my mistakes, like Lewis Morgan, who's playing for Red Bull here, scoring goals right, left and centre. He was at Rangers Academy when I was there.
Oh, wow.
And we let him go. So you don't get them all right.
You never know.
You never know.
So, quick assessment. You've been here at Charlotte for just a short amount of time. What have you noticed here? Like you said, you were pleasantly surprised about the quality of players, but do you, now knowing all you know, like, can you instantly kind of see like, okay, I can see the kids that are going to be moving up and the ones that, you know, have that potential?
No.
No.
Not yet, no.
Yeah.
I mean, the challenge for me here is that I'm working more with the first team here than I was at Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So I work with the first team, the second team, and the academy. So I have to divide my time and energy. So at the Union, having built the academy, basically,
Right.
I knew every staff member.
Yeah.
I knew every player. Not every player. I didn't
But
know.
most of
I
them,
didn't
a lot,
know.
yeah.
There was a lot of young ones came in that I was.
Yeah.
I just couldn't possibly know. And then I was involved with the second team with the Union a lot, less with the first team.
Yeah.
But I knew the first team really well because a lot of the players had come through the academy, a lot of the staff had
already
come
known
through
them.
the academy,
Yeah.
you know. So, and I was there 10 years. I've been here 3 months.
Right.
Yeah.
So why the first team so much? What do you think? Is that kind of like a whole decision, like everybody talking, and especially with the amount of young players we have? Is that why?
Well, part of my job is to try and align what's going on across each of the sectors, the academy, the second team, the first team. And to build, let's say, a game model and strategic methodology across the club.
Yeah.
And to work with Dean Smith to do that and the first team staff. So understanding how they're operating
Right.
was really important.
Yeah.
So I've got a really good understanding of that now. So the idea now is to try and like align the teams and align the different sectors.
Right. So they're all supporting.
Yeah, there is a lot of alignment, but there's bits that we could do better in. It's I would say at the Union, there was a sort of not a unique way of playing, but a identifiable way of playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That I was involved along with Ernst Tanner and Jim Curtin in putting that in place.
Yeah.
So I need to go through a similar process here.
And that takes time, I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, you don't want to destabilise everything.
Right.
You know, like the second team's, 10 games into their season, the academy's towards the end of their season, so
Right.
you can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater,
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of alignment, but in the future we will be more closely aligned.
Yeah. So so your relationship with Dean, did you know Dean before you came here?
No,
No. So
which was probably a good thing.
yeah. How?
Well,
I believe you.
because we've had to work each other out a little bit, It's not like
You don't assume anything.
there's no assumption there, and I mean, obviously, I made a few phone calls to find out about Dean, and he told me he did the same about me. And then you have to build a trust, and it's been good for me learning. I always want to learn, and so I'm watching a top practitioner working every day. A guy that's operated at the top end of the game.
Yeah.
I mean, if you ask any coach on the planet what their aspirations would be, I would probably say 9 out of 10 would probably want to work in the English Premier League.
Mm-hmm.
So, he's got a way of working, he's got a process, and it's been really interesting watching that unfold to see how he does it.
Yeah.
So that's why I think that it's a good experience to come in fresh,
Yeah.
not knowing what to expect,
Right.
and to quickly build that rapport and trust has been.
Do you
I've
regularly
enjoyed it.
Do you regularly meet with him?
Well, only every day.
Only every day. Just
You're
talking about.
Yeah, sometimes they're informal, sometimes they're formal, mainly informal.
Yeah.
And, I've got a really good idea now of what he likes with the ball, what he likes without the ball, how he wants to operate in transition. What's important to him and the type of players he likes.
Yeah.
These are all critical things. Like if I go back to my manufacturing days, that you need to know what you're manufacturing for. You need to
Right.
know what the end product looks like.
Right. Before you start building.
Before you start building it.
Right.
So the end product that Dean likes should be something that we want to manufacture for.
Right.
And if we adopt that process or that methodology and make it our club-wide model,
Right.
then in the future when Dean goes away to take the England job or whatever,
Right.
Right. Then the club is...
But does that mean that now the club's identity is what Dean put in place?
No,
because you're kind of leading that, or does it change when a new coach comes in?
That's... I would say that it's not just me. Like there's Zoran and Bobby in that process.
Right.
Our director of scouting, Thomas, is involved in the process.
Right.
Jose from the second team, Scalesy and the guys in the academy. We're all stakeholders, we all have an input. So if we like what Dean's doing, then we take that and we make it our own to some extent.
Right.
We add our own ideas. But, and that then can become the club identity. The club then, or the senior figures in the club, would need to decide. Like when I was at the Union, Ernie Stewart was the sporting director, and I worked with Ernie and Jim Curtin on their style of play.
Right.
Now Ernie's, despite the fact he's a US international, he's from Holland, so there's a different way of playing. So when Ernst Tanner came in, there was the Union method then, and the Union method now is totally different.
Yeah.
So if we can create an alignment across the club, and the coach changes,
Right.
it's normal. Whoever we hire to come in, or whoever the club hires to come in, because I don't know who'll be here then,
Right.
can decide whether they want to throw everything away and start again, or say to the incoming coach, this is how we operate.
Right.
Like Barcelona.
Right. This is
This
how
is
we
what we
play.
do.
We want you to do this.
Can you align yourself to these values? Yes or no. Or I can align myself to 90%, but I'd like to be able to change that 10%.
Right. Because hopefully whoever you bring in, whether it's coaches down at the academy or second level, whoever, you want them to take this, but then also make it better. Like that's why they're being brought in, is because you want to elevate every player, every team.
Yeah, it has to evolve. I know that the minute I was doing it before I came to meet you, committing some thoughts down to paper about how we want our teams to play, what our principles are. I know that the minute I complete that document, it's obsolete.
Right.
It's only a basis from which to build, and I've got I've got some ideas from 5-6 years ago that I'd committed to paper, and I look at them now and I think, I'm not sure, did I actually write that? I'm not sure about that.
So how does, in player development and also coach development, how do you personalize it and customize it? Because if you're trying to, elevate everybody kind of in this pathway, but then people have individual needs. I mean, you talked about Derek.
Yeah.
There were certain things you had to do to help him be at his best, which is not the same thing you're going to do for everybody else.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the biggest challenges here is that you're trying to develop individuals in a team sport. Because ultimately it's about the individuals, getting them through this pathway that we've created and popping out the other end to go and sit in that chair that's on the picture on the wall there in the stadium and be crowned as the man of the match or whatever.
Right.
Person of the match, I should say these days, a player of the match, whatever, however you. That's the challenge, and that's always been the challenge and always will be. The team is just a vehicle for that, and the methodology is just some ideas that you have about player development. Like, the biggest challenge for me in player development is that the coaches should make each of the sessions cognitively challenging, because that's where the success is, between your ears. So you could put on a great training session, one that you think, this is one of my best ones, and it's easy for you the players are not learning anything. So I have to make sure that, or we have to make sure that the environment challenges everyone, and that subtly we've identified who our top prospects are, our high potential players, and that there's an additional development goes into them. There's an additional attention given to them.
Right.
That there's an individual development plan for each of them.
Yeah.
That accelerates their growth and development.
Yeah, Dean, I mean, he even talked about their individual development plans for the first team. So I'm sure that's just pushed all the way down.
Well, when you think about it, like a lot of clubs I've been involved with individual development. You get to the first team and they're only interested in winning games. But one of Dean's great qualities is that he wants to develop our first team players. I think he recognises that for the first team to get better, each of the individuals has to get better.
Right.
And to get buy-in from the Ashley Westwoods of this world, you know, who's a senior professional at the top of his game, that, you know, can he get any better? Does he need to get any better?
Right.
If guys like that, the team captain, accept that they can get better,
right,
then those are great role models, not only for the academy players, but for the second team players and the younger first team players.
Right.
And that, like, the manager's voice is like a megaphone when it comes to that. So if we have a meeting about individual development that myself and Miles Joseph have been working on along with Taylor Wilson, and it's coming from, think about it, it's coming from the first team.
Yeah.
Down.
Yeah.
That message is so loud.
Right.
So clear right across the development continuum in our club.
Plus, it also just develops that continuing wanting to be better for yourself type of atmosphere throughout their career. So not only are you developing them now, but like when they are first years somewhere else or somewhere like that, they're going to be like, how can I get better at this?
It's like when we're hiring staff, one of the things I look for is, apart from personality, is curiosity.
Yeah.
You know, do you think you know it all, or are you really interested in learning?
Yeah.
And that's why coming here from the Union, I mean, I'm not saying I'd stop learning at Philadelphia Union. That's not the case. But for me to come here into a different role and to work with the guys I'm working with now, I'm learning. Yeah. Every day I'm learning something.
So I never even asked you, like, what made you leave Philadelphia? Like, that seems like a good gig.
Yeah, no, it was. And you know, like, I got to the bit there, the stage where I was comfortable. Mm-hmm. We had been successful. If I had a couple of barren years, it wouldn't really have affected that.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I'd like another challenge. And I wanted the job appealed to me, and the potential here appealed to me, you know.
Yeah.
When you look at the scale of the club, I mean, which other clubs can get 75,000 people in their stadium, you know? Yeah. It would be nice to get that in it every week when we have a home game. That's a challenge for the club.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, but, you know, just the potential here. And I spoke to Zoran, and I knew that our respective strengths would complement each other. I didn't know that Dean was going to be the coach at that time, initially.
Yeah.
I did eventually.
Yeah. Wow. When you talk about these young players, and you also talked about like coaching coaches and influencing them, you know, they're learning just like you are. But for the players, like, do you or someone like meet with their parents? Do you have like regular meetings? Because it's almost like in a way, it's like a school, right?
Yeah.
You're guiding them through each year what they need to do and check-ins.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to Brian today about that. Like, I can tell you what happened at the Union because I'm less familiar with. So there was an initial meeting. If you think about it, the academy season runs on the school calendar year.
Yeah.
So there'd be an initial meeting in August. there would be a intermediate meeting around the turn of the year,
Yeah.
and a final meeting towards the end of the season. So the first meeting was always like, like sometimes it was a repeat meeting because players had been with you for a number of years. But if it was a new player, it would be an introduction to the club. These are our expectations. That here's our handbook. This is how we operate.
All right.
Managing expectations. The middle meeting was always one that I would say to the staff, make sure you mark the parent's card as to where their son is.
Yeah.
If he doesn't do A, B, and C, the likelihood is that he won't be here next year.
Right. That's a hard thing to take for a young player.
Yeah,
That
but
they're going to be.
you're-
They get in and then
But
they're not in.
you're giving them 4 months, 5 months notice. Mm-hmm. Whereas I've seen it too often. You're nice to them, you welcome them. In the middle of the season meeting where you really need to tell them, you fudge it and you
Right.
say he's doing really well. And then you come to the end of the season meeting and you say, you told me all the feedback I've had is positive and now you're letting them go.
Right.
So there has to be a process and language used. I used to do a checklist with grades and stuff.
Yeah,
But the
yeah.
parents would slide it across the table and they would weaponise it.
Yeah.
So I came away from that. But we kind of taught the staff there was a process. Like in the middle meeting,
Yeah.
you have to be really clear and honest.
And it's about the skills they
Yeah.
need to develop. It's not about the performance, like you said. It's a lot of like, are they developing in this particular area that they need to be working on?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you help the team win the GA Cup or something like that. What did you kind of grow to?
Yeah, and like a lot of parents would say, some parents would log the amount of minutes their kids played. They would come in with a bit of paper.
Right.
He's only played 33.5% of the minutes available.
Right.
And I would say, or the coaches would say, yeah, but he's been in 100% of the training sessions. And that's how we measure his progress.
Right.
The game is just an extended training session.
Yeah.
The parents don't see that, and I understand. I get it. Some clubs put quotas on the amount of minutes that they have to play, and I didn't subscribe to that. I think if you're in the English the Triple P, the high performance program in England, there's a minimum amount of minutes that are guaranteed for players, and I can see why you would do that, because player A and player B, your son and my son are both there 6 days a week.
Right.
They're both, committed to the training. They're both,
Right.
like in the gym as much as they need to be. Your son's playing 80% and my boy's playing 20%.
Right.
That's just the reality.
There's but then they say, well, why are they even there if they're doing that? But I mean, I guess they just learn quicker that, it is about that final thing in the end.
Yeah.
But we're here to develop you so you can be in that sustained.
And I think that your club starts to develop a reputation, and the Union got a reputation for player development and put their young players in their first team.
Yeah.
And, you can't argue with that. It actually happens. It's there.
Yeah.
It's quantifiable. It's not subjective. So
I mean, that's something Dean's been doing. Is that something you encourage and you like that there's that much young talent?
yeah, I mean, like Dean, he sees the young players. He put Nympha in the training, put him in the team in the early games.
Yeah.
There's other young players like Tiger Smalls has come in now.
Tiger's not as young.
He's not as young, but he's young to this club.
Right.
He came through college, so he's like, when I came here at first, people were talking to me about all these young players, and they were all 23, 24, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, a young player's 16 or 17,
Right.
but it's a different culture.
Right.
So, no, from what I've seen for Dean, he doesn't care what age they are. He doesn't. He'll just put them right in.
So are there guys that you all are seeing now? They're like, these guys they could be first teamers. Like,
Yeah,
That's what you're kind of
yeah,
looking for.
There are some. Now they have to. We're fortunate here that we've got a very strong second team program.
Yeah.
You know, we've got excellent coaches. We've got a lot of investment in our second team, more than a lot of clubs. You know, the Crown Legacy, that project, where it's like a separate brand, but the players are all here in the same building.
Right.
Is quite interesting, and there's maybe 4 of the last year's Legacy team in the first team.
Right.
And that's Crown Legacy's legacy, if you like.
Yeah.
You know, if Crown Legacy can do that every year,
Right.
then it's a slightly different model from Philadelphia Union, because the respective ages of the teams are different. But at the same time, it's a different manufacturing process,
Right.
but you're still producing players that hopefully will excel, you know, in the first team.
Nice. Now, we have a couple more questions for you in here. I saw you have your website, and I saw on there that you like to help people kind of forecast or kind of understand how to develop players, but you got to know a lot about the game. And one of your questions you put on there is, what does the game of the future look like, and how do you stay ahead? Mm-hmm. How do you answer that? If somebody says, what do you do? In today's football world?
That's the $1 million question. I guess if I could answer it, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be sitting on a beach in Bermuda or something. No, I wouldn't be. I would.
But from what you know, like what does it look like now?
Yeah.
Like, what are you seeing? Like, this is a trend, or this is a thing we need to be moving towards.
Well, I mean, if you look at there are things that you can measure. Mm-hmm. If you look at the distances covered in the games, the amount of high speed running. If you, and I was at a UEFA and FIFA presentation on both of these things, and I heard Arsene Wenger speak recently.
Yeah.
And if you think of Arsene Wenger's Arsenal teams, did you ever watch a lot of them?
No, I didn't.
So when I would say they were open, expansive. You know, Thierry Henry, these guys, top quality players. But now, when I heard them speaking before the World Cup there in Doha, he talked about how compact teams need to be. And if you think about the distances between the players, with and without the ball, there's a compactness, and so that the top players don't have the space and time to get their head up, to play. And what I'm seeing is that when teams are defending now, increasingly they're defending with 11 players.
Right. I've noticed that too.
Yeah, in the game, 5 years ago, the 2 forwards were standing up the pitch waiting for the ball to come to them. Mm-hmm. So there's a, and like as a race, we're getting more athletic.
Yeah.
We're getting taller. Yeah. We're getting stronger. We're getting quicker.
Yeah.
So those bits will continue to change. I think the ability to, improving your technique under pressure will be one thing in the future. I think increasingly use of data and virtual reality. Because if you think about it, if I can put you into a room where you think you're in front of 100,000 people and you're having to react to game-like situations.
Right. Or the pressure of a penalty kick or something like that.
Yeah, and then being able to predict what your opponent's going to do. These are things that have been mooted that are coming down the pipe. It's hard to. The one thing for sure I know is that the game will look different in 10 years than it does now. Mm-hmm. You also look at the rules, the way the rules are changing.
Yeah.
I mean, will they change the size of the field, the size of the goal?
Right.
Will they make, like when I was playing, I was speaking to Dean about this. When I was playing for most of my career, you could pass the ball back to the goalie and he could pick it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I was playing, there was only 2 subs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that changes the way you focus anything.
yeah,
And, your players have to be able to go those longer distances.
yeah, and I think that increasingly the use of substitutes will begin to make a difference. We're only learning now that, wait a minute, we've got 5 subs.
Right.
So how do we best use them?
Yeah. And it's all based on what's happening in the actual match. And you got to have the right pieces for that.
So I identified the question, how to predict the future, as I didn't say I had the answer.
That's fine. Is there a moment in your career that's just been like, this was the scariest moment? Like, I can't believe I did this?
Well, I would say yes. It's funny, I was speaking to my wife today about it. When I was 20, 21, I was playing against Rangers for St Mirren, and it was the last minute of the game, and a famous Scottish player called Davy Cooper got the ball, and I was marking him, and I took the ball off him. So the 93rd minute. I probably wouldn't have scored because I didn't score many goals, but I was heading towards the goal at Ibrox.
Yeah.
50,000 people there. And I get hit with a tackle. And I was at the game for a year. And I was at the doctor's this morning because my knee is starting to give me a bit of problem now. Now, I was able to play for another 14 years after that.
Yeah.
But at one point, the doctor said, we'll just get you walking first before you can even think about running. So It was a really serious injury. I was out for a year. So that was pretty scary. And it just came back to me today that's why my knee is... That's why I won't be pulling on the number 2 shirt anytime soon,
Yeah. Well, on the flip side, what's a moment in your career that you just see so vividly, you just replay it 100 times, like that was like the pinnacle for you?
I think
it could also be just your career as a coach, as a developer. It doesn't have to be your playing career.
No, I think that when I was growing up, there wasn't a lot of live TV. There wasn't a lot of games on live TV. Mm-hmm. Usually it would be the FA Cup, Scottish Cup,
right,
European Championships, World Cup.
Yeah.
Like nowadays every weekend you can watch live. That wasn't the case.
Anything.
You had the highlights at night.
Right.
The highlights came on after the news, and the newsreader would say, "Here are the football results. If you don't want to know the score, look away now." Right. And he wouldn't read them out, so you didn't know the score when you were watching the game. So to play in the Scottish Cup final in 1987 live on TV for St Mirren at the stadium that I grew up in, Queen's Park, the National Stadium.
Yeah.
For it to be the last all-Scottish team to win the Scottish Cup.
That's cool.
I can still see us walking out onto the pitch.
Neat.
I can see after the game my Uncle Billy, who came in from Canada with my parents, giving him my shorts. I think I gave him my shorts to take back to Canada with him. So that was pretty special.
That's pretty cool. All right, we have a thing we do at the end of our show. We call it stoppage time. They're like quick answer questions.
Okay.
It's stoppage time.
All right, do you have a must-do personal ritual?
No.
Nothing to do. Okay.
Well, I did when I was playing.
You did? What was it?
I always wore the same shin guards.
No matter what. So
I kept
16
them for
years.
I kept not 16 years, but I kept them from when I got them.
Yeah.
I kept them right through to the end of my career, and they were. I don't know where they are now.
They're in a museum.
Yeah.
A favorite unplugged activity? Something you do without any technology, you just kind of just get away.
I like to walk.
Yeah.
Listen to books.
Oh, speaking of books, I heard you're a big fan of The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle.
Yeah.
Is there something you're reading now? Because that sounds like something that influenced you to build what you're doing.
Yeah, well, Richie Graham, who I mentioned earlier, brought Dan Coyle into our establishment.
Yeah.
And he was writing, I don't know if he was writing that book or he was writing a book at the time. And I've always been interested in that. I think there are some imperceptible things that happen that create a culture that can be successful. I don't know what they are.
Yeah.
I can only use my feel or so.
There's, like you said, they're the intangible things, but you
Yeah.
know you have it when you have it.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of authors, I love Michael Connelly, but he writes crime fiction. So the last book I read, like that one, would have been Legacy about the All
Okay.
Blacks.
Okay, nice. Do you have a go-to snack when you're watching a match?
Usually water.
Okay.
It's a nervous thing. If anytime you see me at
can't
a
eat
game,
during a match?
I'm drinking water.
Okay.
You mean on the TV or?
No, yeah, you're just watching on TV. You're just sitting back, kicking back, and watching the match. Because now there's everything on TV, like we said.
Oh, I love chocolate. It'd probably be a bar of chocolate.
Any type of chocolate you get?
Cadbury's.
Okay.
But I need to wait till I'm back in Britain to get the Cadbury's because it's not the same over
Yeah,
here.
they're made different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Tony husband said the same thing. He's
Yeah.
like, I need to get them from there because they're just
Yeah.
made different. What impresses you more, interior or exterior of things?
You mean like the outdoors
Anything.
or?
Well, just like in processes, in products, in
Interior.
people, interior, exterior. Interior.
Interior, yeah. I like
The engineering mind's coming
engineering.
out.
Like I've got a nice watch, and it's not because it's expensive. It's just because of the workings of it. You know.
Like you'd like to break that open and really look and see
Yeah.
what's happening.
I've got another one, a Panerai one, and if you turn it round, there's a glass back,
Oh,
and you can
that's
see
neat.
all the.
The mechanism.
It's just the engineer in me, you know. Yeah,
That's cool. Do you find starting a project or finishing one more gratifying?
starting.
All right. What recharges you? You don't get many breaks in MLS, so what?
No, I think I rest when I can because every day I need to decide where to put my energy. So I need to make sure that my batteries are recharged. And when I know now when I'm not. So I try and get away from it.
Right.
Because in my job with the three different academy, second team, first team, there's never a day that there's not a training session. There's never a day there's not a game.
Right.
So I need to be disciplined and disconnect.
Nice. All right. Last one. If you were a current player on Charlotte FC, what player would you most be like? Maybe in your demeanor, the way you played, the way you want to play.
Oof, I need to go to my position then.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know.
I'd need to be Nathan Byrne because I'm a right back, you know,
Yeah.
like, and he's I'm
He's
sure-
the ultimate
I'm
professional.
sure I'm 2 or 3 inches taller than him. I hope he hears this because
Yeah.
we're probably about the same height, but I would claim to be 2 or 3 inches taller than him. And you know, you're often up against bigger, stronger, quicker guys.
Right.
Not quicker because I was really quick and he's quick as well. But
Yeah.
I would say that would be the player that
Do you have that feistiness like he has?
Yeah, I
Is
had
that
to
you
be-
now too? Like, do you get really?
not really, but I think you have to be if you're not as big and strong, you need to be aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
So, in order to survive at that level,
Right.
So I would say that that would be. I couldn't claim to be Patrick up front because I never scored any goals.
Right.
I don't run like him. I'm not as quick as him, as tall as him.
Yeah.
I was a right back and a right back and a right back, and that would be me.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Tommy. Appreciate you being on the show.
Pleasure.
Nice meeting you, sir.
Nice to meet you.
I hope you enjoyed listening to my conversation with Tommy Wilson, Technical Director for Charlotte FC, as he shared his journey. It takes a very special person to take on such a monumental task of shaping and fostering growth from every individual for themselves, as well as the greater good of the club for the future. Tommy's passion for people and helping them learn how to be the best versions of themselves stood out to me, whether as a player or coach. I also like his quote from the interview where Tommy said, "It's your journey, not anyone else's." That stuck in my brain. Seize the moment. Seize the moment. That's it for this episode of the Charlotte FC podcast. Thanks again for listening. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to our podcast and follow us on X, Instagram, and YouTube at CLTFC Podcast. Enjoy your day.